Welcome back. You're watching Startup Central. The odds are pretty high that a lot of you have seen Uri, the big Bollywood movie. Remember Uri, the surgical strike? The movie was a dramatized account of the Indian Army's retaliation to the 2016 Uri attack. Remember Vicky Kaushal and how's the Josh? Well, that's exactly what this startup is asking. How's the Josh? It powered that Uri mission with the night vision systems. Here's an exclusive report that we're getting you of Tonbo imaging.
Well, yes, who would have thought that Bengaluru, that is the hub for a lot of e-commerce players, tech-backed players, also has a very, very interesting defense startup that's powering the technology not only of the Indian Army, but established players like the US and Israel. And joining me is Arvind from the startup. Thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us on ET Now. Arvind, I've been to aero shows, interviewed a lot of defense players, but for the first time, a startup that's really operating in the defense space. And what really caught my interest was, interestingly, and we only know of it now, the surgical strike by the Indian Army has been talked about so much, but now we know that there's a Bengaluru connection, there's a startup connection, and you've sort of played a very interesting role on how the operation was carried out. Talk to us about the connection with the surgical strike.
The surgical strike was carried out by the Udhampur forces. I mean, so the Northern Command in Udhampur. A large number of our systems, our night vision systems, were deployed with them. We supply night vision devices, helmet-mounted sights, weapon sights. Some of the weapon sights we supply are these really small weapon sights. So this is a thermal imaging weapon sight. So what it does is it allows you to, essentially aim a weapon and shoot in complete darkness, right? In zero light conditions. So it's got a thermal imager, which essentially, so typically, your camera allows you to see in the daytime because there is light. What this allows you to see is in nighttime and allows you to see in fog and in smoky conditions. So it essentially takes heat radiation from the environment and converts it into an image. And what we do is we build the entire system. Except for the sensor inside it, we build the optics, we build the electronics, and we build the image processing system on it. And this system essentially is sold in thousands of units. We make thousands of these systems. They're sold to the Indian Army and they're sold to forces around the world. And we're proud to say that this played a pretty vital role in the Indian Army's combat operations, not just in the Uri strikes, but in a lot of the strikes which they've carried out.
But talk to us about how did you really decide to start up in the area of defense?
We always felt that defense forces, they need advanced technology equipment, which they don't have today, and we need to do something for it, right? And that was the itch which started it. And among the defense forces itself, we figured that what they really need most is imaging equipment. And since we had a lot of experience designing this imaging equipment, it made sense to start off with that. And that essentially is the reason why we went to it.
Interesting. How tough was it to really convince the Indian Army? Of course, you have prototypes in place. You had a lot of global customers. But how tough was it to convince them? Also because traditionally, when they want to engage with a defense supplier, so to say, they prefer a couple of decades of experience or at least a decade of experience as a startup. How did you really crack that?
India and emerging markets are not early adopters of technology, right? And if you're a startup and you go to the Indian Defense Forces, and rightly so, you go to them and say, buy my technology, they don't know whether you're going to exist tomorrow or not. So we said, let's start selling to developed countries. Let's sell to Israel, let's sell to US, let's sell to markets which are already developed, demonstrate that the product and the technology has got reasonable superiority. And that would convince the Indian customer to buy it. And that's what happened. So we sold to about 5 different countries before we sold to India. And that's essentially the reason why.
But it must have been a lot more difficult to convince the US Navy or the Army, which you sort of now have a strong partnership, right? So how did that?
I used to work with the US DoD till 2004. So I have a strong relationship with DARPA, US DoD, the US Special Operations Command. And one of the advantages with the US and some of the developed countries is they're willing to take a risk on unproven technology and unproven businesses, right? Because their point is some of these disruptions come from people who are not well established necessarily, right? So, you're used to Raytheon's, Lockheed's, Northrop Grumman, the large defense companies, but there are startups in various parts of the world which build technologies where disruptions come from. So the US and some of the international forces were willing to give us a chance, and we are grateful for that, because once they give you the chance, you validate and show that the technology is competitive, and then the emerging market starts buying it.
Got it. But, what is the India innovation behind it? You were telling us most of what you have a strong R&D team here in place, but what's the India innovation quotient really in the product?
So everything is India. So the point about it from a business point, we said, look, the idea is that currently when we talk about make in India, most companies in India do not really make in India. I mean, what they do is they manufacture in India, right? So which basically means the core technology components for many of them come from outside. True make in India is where design happens in India, right? And that's what we do. I mean, every aspect of this is designed in India. It's designed in this facility in Bangalore, right? And we have facilities in Bangalore where entire design for the optics chain, the optical elements, the lens, the electronics, the sensors, the entire system is put together.
Here.
Everything is done in Bangalore, right? So we invite our customers. So we have centers around the world, but we said we invite our customers to India because India is where a lot of the design happens, right? And the Indian customer actually gets a product which is truly designed, developed and manufactured in India. As part of IDDM in India, indigenously designed, developed and manufactured, the criteria is about 50% should be designed and manufactured in India. Here, more than 90% of this product is designed and manufactured in India.
Last 10 years, 15 years, the way wars are fought, let's keep aside cyber security and all of that aside, pure play defense, so much has changed in terms of imaging, sensors. What really is the future as far as defense tech is concerned?
Today, it's all about intelligence, right? How do you see the environment? How can I understand the environment? So our philosophy for the defense market is, how do you assist humans today? How do you augment humans today? And how do you replace humans tomorrow, right? So we are building the autonomous stack for the battlefield, right? So the way we see military evolving is there are going to be no soldiers, there are going to be no people controlling these UAVs. It's going to be completely autonomous because there's no great joy in getting shot in a battlefield, and who you're really fighting for, right? And the fundamental thing which we're saying is to enable autonomy on a battlefield, you require a whole slew of technologies, right? So what we are doing is laying the platform and the slew of technologies which will enable autonomy on a battlefield today, right? And which is whether it is cameras, whether it is image processing systems, whether it's computer vision systems, whether it's machine learning systems, everything which will enable autonomy on a battlefield, that's what we are building today.
That's what would really stand out in the coming time as well. Interesting take. Also, very, very interesting, while we were talking on the way to your office here, the R&D center, was you mentioned how Binny Bansal, who now we know as the co-founder of Flipkart, actually had a stint with your startup, way before, of course, he started off Flipkart, but everyone talks about his Amazon days, but this is really unknown. So tell us about that.
So it was not Tonbo at that time, right? Yeah. So Tonbo in its previous avatar was Sarnoff Corporation. And so Sarnoff was the former Radio Corporation of America, and it had set up a subsidiary in India. And so Binny, so I was Binny's first manager. Binny was hired out of IIT Delhi, and he used to work in our group. And so he used to work in the computer vision group, and and he worked with us for 1.5 years. And of course, he went to do much bigger things, but that's his stint with Sarnoff. So we are in touch with him.
What was he really involved in? What sort of a person, what really interested him way back then when he just graduated out and was working on?
So Binny is a very smart kid with lots of experience in computer vision, right? He worked with the automotive vision team. So he worked on technologies for autonomous, that time we were building technologies for autonomous navigation. And one of his core focuses was using vision for autonomous navigation. And he worked with the automotive vision team for 1.5 years. And extremely bright, clearly, and he worked very well in a team. And I think that's pretty, and I think his interests were very technical. At that point, obviously, there was no interest in starting a business or anything related to it, and his interest was technical. And obviously, he's evolved and matured as a business person. And but when he worked with us, he was just a very fabulous technical engineer who's very good at his job.
Wonderful chatting with you, Arvind. So nice to know this startup here in Bangalore, really disrupting the tech as far as defense is concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.